However, despite the fact that you have read all of the books, watched all of the videos, and uttered every affirmation into the mirror, there is still a portion of you that feels as though it is not appreciated. Despite this, there's a part of you that aches in quiet. Rarely do you bring it up in conversation. You have perfected the smile, the posture, and giving the impression that your life is well organized. On the other hand, when it is late at night or in those peaceful moments in between, the questions that keep popping up are, why do I feel so disconnected? I don't understand why love seems so far away, like a dream that I've been taught exists, but have never actually experienced. Thank you. The cruel and liberating truth, which Carl Jung recognized with startling clarity, is that you are not fully loved because you have not yet manifested yourself in a way that is true to who you are. It's not because you're acting like you're not who you are on the outside. Rather, it's because you've locked up aspects of yourself on the inside. And for as long as you continue to be fragmented, the love that you draw will never touch the whole of you. It will only ever touch the parts. This is the pain that you are experiencing, the pain of only being partially seen, of being accepted on a conditional basis, of being selected solely for the mask that you wear, and never for the complete representation of who you are. Furthermore, it is not your responsibility. For you, being lovable meant being pleasing, quiet, productive, impressive, gentle, and agreeable. Not too much, not too sensitive, not too furious, and not too messy. You were taught to hide, you were taught to adapt, and you're taught that all of these things are necessary. As a result, you buried your true self in order to pursue relationships that were secure but never fulfilled you. Even though you called it love, it was actually survival. It was Carl Jung who observed, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. However, becoming who you truly are is not a linear road. Rather, it is a process of peeling away, returning, and confronting every aspect of yourself that you have been taught to abandon. Because you have abandoned yourself, you are not genuinely loved yet. This is not because love has abandoned you. Rather, it is because you have abandoned yourself. You will unintentionally attract others who match your dissociation for as long as you continue to push your shadows, your fire, your neediness, your worries, and your wants into the background. Despite your desire for connection, you will sabotage it, because what you reject on the inside will always be reflected on the outside. You'll have a strong need for acceptance, yet turn it away. Take into consideration the one who caused you to feel unworthy, insignificant, and insecure, and who you couldn't stop obsessing over that person. Was it truly them, or was it something that they sparked in you, something that they mirrored back to you that you hadn't yet made peace with? This is the mirror, right? Every moment of emotional turbulence, every attraction, and every trigger is not a random occurrence. Rather, it is a revelation of your inner reality, of the parts of yourself that have not yet been healed, and of the self that you have refused to fully reclaim. Moreover, this is the point at which everything starts to shift. Love is not something that you acquire. Rather, it is something that you encounter. When you stop asking, why don't they love me the way I need, and start asking, what parts of me have I still not accepted? Because it is something that resonates. And because it can only completely resonate with you when you have made peace with every aspect of your being, it is something that resonates. Jung did not instruct individuals on how to find love. Rather, he instructed them on how to discover who they were. Moreover, when you discover you, the proper people will no longer feel so distant from you. This is not because the world has changed. Rather, it is because your frequency has altered. You begin to become aware of the people who deplete you and those that empower you. At this point, you start to become aware of the distinction between chemistry that is based on trauma and chemistry that is based on truth. You begin to come to the realization that some of the individuals you pursued were not intended to remain in your life. They were intended to reawaken you, to rip away the layers, to demonstrate to you the areas in which your value was still dependent on performance, and to remind you of the areas in which you continue to abandon yourself in order to create the illusion of connection. In addition, once you become aware of this, you will cease blaming them. No longer do you wait for the conclusion. Stop rehashing the events of the past and begin to take control of the present moment. You make an effort to sit with yourself, not the self that has been curated, but the self that is raw, unfiltered, and aching. And you start to listen, not with the intention of repairing or bettering, but rather simply observe. In addition, the act of witnessing is the starting point for love. For the simple reason that you cannot be loved in a genuine way if you are not known in a genuine way. And you cannot be known in a genuine way if you continue to hide behind personalities that are constructed for acceptance. This persona was referred to by Jung as a mask for the collective. It was a necessary interface, but it was also harmful when it was mistaken for the individuals themselves. It's not uncommon for many of us to confuse our masks with our true selves. For the reason that we have buried it so deeply, we have stopped loving it ourselves, and as a result, we have forgotten what it is like to be loved for who we truly are. Okay, so how do you go back? What are some ways that you can present yourself as your complete self when the world has praised you for different things? It starts with radical self-confrontation, which involves identifying your patterns without passing judgment on them, sitting in your triggers and asking what they're trying to teach you, and observing who you become when you feel rejected and making the decision to not give up on yourself in that moment. The process starts with turning toward the shadow, not with the intention of eradicating it, but rather of integrating it, and seeing the aspects of yourself that you once deemed unlovable as the very keys to your freedom. However, your fury is not your adversary. Rather, it is your guardian. Your neediness is not a sign of weakness. Rather, it speaks to your need for closeness. Your envy is not evidence that you are a little person. Rather, it is the wounded part of you that continues to feel that love is few and far between. All of them are not defects. Rather, they are indicators. In addition, when you follow them inward, they will take you back to the completeness that you have never lost but have simply forgotten. The irony is that once you stop striving to be lovable, you have the ability to become magnetic. This is not because you have perfected yourself. Rather, it is because you have embodied who you are. You have made the decision to cease outsourcing your worth to others who are unable to hold it. You have ceased filtering your essence in order to conform to the comfort zone of another individual. At this point, you have stopped acting and have begun to be. As a result of this, you attract others who do not merely tolerate your truth. Rather, they identify with it because they, too, have traveled the journey that leads inward. Likewise, they have confronted their own shadows. Not only are they no longer searching for someone to complete them, but they are also looking to meet them. The moment two complete individuals come together, love ceases to be a transaction. Rather, it transforms into an enlargement, a sacred mirror, a space where both light and shadow are accepted and where wounds are not allowed to exist. However, it is held at a place where growth is not required but rather inspired. This is the kind of love that you have been looking for, but does not reside in the arms of another person. Rather, it starts in your own personal space. To answer your question, the reason you are not yet loved completely is not because you are broken. Rather, it is because you are still running away. However, now you are aware, and when you are aware, you have a choice. You have the choice to either continue to perform, to perfect, and to pursue love as if it were something that exists outside of you. Or you can choose to embark on the one and only trip that ever truly counts. This is the one that is inner, the one that you have planned out, the one in which each step you take toward your shadow is a step into your soul. Your response is your life, and when you decide to take the path that leads inside, everything starts to fall into place. This is not because life suddenly gets simpler. Rather, it is because you're no longer split inside it by any means. The individuals you've loved the most are beginning to make it very plain to you that they were never intended to complete you. Rather, they were mirrors. Moreover, those mirrors, regardless matter whether they were blunt or sharp, never lied. They were revealing to you everything that you had failed to acknowledge, every wound that you had refused to look at, every characteristic that you had attempted to conceal, and every aspect of your soul that had been neglected within you. They did not represent your salvation. Rather, they were a reflection of you. This conclusion is a powerful one since it indicates that the anguish was not caused by betrayal, but rather by revelation. It indicates that they did not reject you. Rather, they simply were unable to locate the genuine version of you because you were not presenting yourself as them. You were giving off the impression that you were an echo of your indoctrination, a version of yourself that was constructed to be accepted rather than to be recognized. A version of you that you don't even love yourself is impossible for anyone else to adore in a genuine way. As a result, you start to unlearn gradually, softly, and occasionally with a great deal of discomfort. You begin to become aware of the frequency with which you repress your emotions in order to maintain harmony, the frequency with which you apologize for speaking the truth in order to maintain someone's favor, the frequency with which you pretend not to care in order to avoid being overly dependent, and the frequency with which you contradict your instincts in order to appear acceptable. And then you come to the realization that every time you do that, every time you shrink, every time you mold yourself for the comfort of another person, you're teaching your nervous system that love needs self-abandonment, and your nervous system believes you. According to a quote attributed to Carl Jung, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. This is not just about your thoughts. It is also about the sense of safety that you feel in your body. Your breath, your posture, and your reluctance to speak up are all indicators that you are aware of the dangers that love poses. You do not merely believe this knowledge logically. And that sensation did not start with the person who caused you the most pain. Rather, it started a long time ago, in a moment from your infancy, in a gradual retreat, and in a pattern of behavior that was inconsistent. Those times when love and agony came together, and your body learned to be loved, were the beginning of it all. This is a betrayal of myself. You are curious about the reasons why true love has not yet been shown to you. The reason for this is because you have been drawing people from that location, that deserted location, that painful location. In addition, we replicate what we attract from, not as a form of punishment, but rather as a form of hope. Hope that this time it would be successful. Act differently this time around. If I only improve my love, work more, and maintain my silence for a longer period of time, I will ultimately be selected. The real you is not present in the room. Thus, you won't be able to do that. Your power is restored here, since no one can make a decision about something that they are unable to see. Instead of blaming them or humiliating yourself, you should focus on reclaiming your presence if you want to succeed. You start to become aware of the signals, such as how your body tenses up when you are around particular individuals, how your speech changes when you feel unsafe, and how your energy contracts when you notice that you're being rejected. Rather than reacting, you begin to listen in order to comprehend, and you begin to observe rather than to correct. You stop trying to force a connection and instead begin to observe the expense of it. And when the price is your truth, you must refuse to accept it, neither out of resentment nor out of fear, but rather out of love for the one person who is always looking forward to your return. Not only were you asked to improve yourself, but you were also asked to complete yourself. Instead of focusing on achieving perfection, one could begin to include the mess. It was your belief that the soul does not wish to be repaired. Rather, it desires to be observed. This includes the fury that you feel embarrassed of, the longing that you were taught to conceal, the wants that you have classified as weakness, and the dreams that you have relinquished because someone told you that they were too much for you to handle. When you integrate, you ensure that no aspect of yourself is neglected. It is not because you are unlovable, because your romantic life has not yet been successful. Rather, it is because you have been loving from a place of exile, from a place that is not at the heart of your being, from the boundaries of your being that have been abandoned. People are able to sense that. They do not react to the words you say. Rather, they react to the spirit that you exude. Your frequency whispers, "Please don't leave," you say. "I love myself." But your energy begs, "Validate me," you say. "I'm fine on my own." But your presence yells, "Save me," you say. "I'm worthy." But your frequency whispers, "Please don't leave." In addition, here is the breakthrough. You do not require being fixed. Rather, you require being returned to yourself in a manner that is both fierce and soft. You must bring all of your parts that have been hidden away back into the light. And you must do it without passing judgment, but rather with reverence. For every part of you was designed to safeguard you. Every single mask, every single defense, and every single reaction kept you alive. It protected you and assisted you in surviving in a world that taught you that love was contingent on certain conditions. However, survival is not the same thing as living, and survival is not the same thing as loving. Moreover, you are prepared for more. That is the reason you are here. That is the reason you are still listening, because a portion of you is aware that genuine love will never come to you as long as you are fractured. It is no longer acceptable for you to give someone chunks of yourself and call that connection what it is. You have reached the end of your pleading for someone to love you in such a way that it will complete you. At this point, you have finished giving up your control in return for a momentary romantic connection. You have reached a point when you are prepared to love from the depths of your being, to speak honestly, and to be recognized not for your performance, but for your presence. And when you arrive at that point, when you begin to live from that truth that is embodied, something changes. When you quit looking for love, when you quit demonstrating your value, you stop elaborating on your requirements. Due to the fact that you have already picked yourself, you no longer have to wait to be selected. As a result of this self-chosen action, you become magnetic, not to everyone, but to others who have also chosen to act in the same manner. Whoever sees your shadow and bows down to its wisdom because they have seen their own, who does not require you to shrink, who does not punish your honesty, who does not mistake your depth for danger, and who does not feel the need to punish your honesty. When love is constructed on the foundation of completeness, it appears as follows. Even if it is not always simple, it is always genuine. Becoming truthful is more important than being comfortable in this situation. You are the starting point and the finishing point for that sort of love and that kind of resonance it is. Mostly due to the fact that the majority of individuals are not terrified of being unloved. Rather, they are afraid of being seen in their true form. The reason for this is that when you're actually seen, your masks will no longer function, your shields will no longer guard you, and your image will no longer shield you from the fear of intimacy. However, the thing that you yearn for the most is to be seen in real life, which requires you to be vulnerable in the most reverent way possible. We are not talking about superficial adulation or validation based on performance. Rather, we're talking about a recognition at the soul level that says, I see you, and I'm not leaving. However, this recognition cannot come until you first provide it to yourself. In order to live, you must stare into the eyes of your own reflection and say, I see you, the one who tried so hard, the one who fought to be enough, the one who survived by becoming whatever others needed, and I'm not leaving you either. Because your wholeness is not something you find in another. It's something you remember in yourself. Carl Jung knew that the soul cannot thrive in distortion, and distortion is what happens when you perform a self that is not aligned with your truth. You become a role, a character, a curated version of who you think you should be. And it works for a while. It gains you love, applause, opportunities. But deep down, there's always that ache, that emptiness that follows even the best days, that haunting sense that no matter how much you do, it's still not enough. That's not failure. That's the call to return, to integrate, to become. If you want to experience genuine love and to be held in a way that is genuine, then you should stop negotiating your soul in exchange for fragments of connection. You should also stop hiding your depth in order to remain acceptable to people who have not yet experienced their own. You should also stop reducing your truth into bite-sized pieces in order to avoid being too much. Because here's something that no one tells you. Your too muchness is only overwhelming to those who have never dared to be full themselves. You're not overly sensitive. You are attuned. You are not overly intense. You are alive. You are not overly emotional. You are honest. These are not flaws. They are frequencies. However, until you stop apologizing for them, you'll continue to attract people who need you to dim, people who love your light only when it stays small enough to keep them comfortable. Jung didn't teach comfort. He taught confrontation. He taught us to face our projections, our triggers, our unmet needs, not to fix them, but to meet them with compassion. And that work, it's not glamorous. It's not something you can showcase on social media. It's quiet, unseen, messy. It looks like sobbing in the dark when you finally realize you've been raying yourself for years. It looks like ending a relationship, not because you don't care, but because you care too much to keep lying. It looks like telling someone, "This is what I need," even when your voice shakes. And it's in those moments, those sacred ruptures, that you begin to build a new relationship with yourself. One that isn't based on conditional love, but on radical presence. One where you no longer leave yourself, even when others do. One where you no longer demand perfection before offering compassion. One where you say, "I'm worthy now," in the mess, in the middle, in the unknown, because that's the only place real love can find you. In the truth, not in the script, not in the image, not in the role, but in the raw, trembling, unfiltered aliveness of your actual being. That is where resonance begins. That is where intimacy is born. That is where everything changes. And yes, it's terrifying to love from that place. It means risking heartbreak. It means letting people in where it actually matters. It means no longer having the protection of your performance. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to avoid pain, you become free because pain is not the enemy. Pretending is numbing, is hiding. It is not love that breaks you. It is the absence of truth. And when you understand that, you stop chasing certainty. You stop needing guarantees. You stop waiting for someone else to go first. You become the one who shows up fully, the one who loves without losing themselves, the one who holds their own hand in the dark, the one who chooses truth even when it costs connection because they know that any connection that cannot hold the truth is not worth keeping. This is the love you've been waiting for, a love rooted in wholeness, not in lack, a love that says, "I don't need you to complete me. I want to meet you for my fullness," a love that doesn't beg, chase, manipulate, or perform. A love that breathes, a love that expands, a love that has nothing to prove because it already is. And it begins with you, not when you're healed, not when you're perfect, not when you finally figure it all out. Now, as you are with all of it. The mess, the brilliance, the fear, the fire. Because the moment you stop resisting your own soul, love stops resisting you. But love, when you finally allow it to be what it truly is, not a reward, not a transaction, not a performance, but a mirror, will humble you. It will show you not what you want to see, but what you need to see. It will not gently tiptoe around your edges. It will pour light into the crevices you've kept hidden. And if you're not ready, you'll call this light pain. You'll call it rejection. You'll call it abandonment. But it's not any of those things. It's revelation. And revelation, by nature, disrupts. It breaks the old shell, and that cracking, that's what you've mistaken for heartbreak. Carl Jung understood this deeply, that the people who break you open are not your enemies. They are your sacred messengers. They come not to hurt you, but to show you what you've built your identity around. That's why it hurts so much when they leave, not just because you miss them, but because they take the mirror with them. You are left with the question, without them, who am I? And if that question terrifies you, it's only because you've never been given permission to answer it without someone else's gaze. So here is your permission now, to no longer define yourself by who stays or who leaves, to no longer shape your worth around the roles you play or the responses you receive, to no longer seek safety in being understood, but in understanding yourself. You stop needing the world to make sense of you when you understand yourself, when you look into the depths and say, "This is me, and I will no longer apologize." You stop needing someone to choose you so that you feel real. The truth is that the majority of people are not looking for love. They are looking for confirmation. Confirmation that they are sufficient, that they are worthy, that they are safe, and that they are seen. However, confirmation will always be fragile because it is dependent on something that is external to each individual. Love, when rooted in self-awareness, becomes unshakable, not because you never feel fear, but because fear no longer decides your life. And when fear no longer leads, your relationships change. You stop being magnetized by people who recreate your childhood wounds. You stop feeling chemistry with those who mirror your trauma. You stop calling chaos passion. You stop mistaking inconsistency for excitement. You begin to desire something subtler, quieter, deeper, not because you've given up, but because you've finally grown up. Your nervous system, once addicted to intensity, begins to crave safety, not the kind that comes from control, but the kind that comes from congruence. When your words match your truth, when your energy aligns with your essence, when your presence no longer requires explanation. Jung called this individuation, not becoming better, but becoming whole, not polishing your image, but returning to your nature. And when two individuated people meet, the connection feels different. It doesn't spike. It doesn't burn through you like a wildfire. It settles, it expands, it feels like home, not because it's perfect, but because it's present, because it honors the full spectrum, because it allows the shadow into the room without trying to fix it. But all of a sudden, everything that you thought love was supposed to be, intoxicating, dramatic, full of high stakes and low valleys, begins to feel immature. You no longer want the roller coaster. You want the ground. You want someone who meets you not because they have to, but because they choose to. You want someone who sees you not as a solution to their pain, but as a companion in their expansion. You will not be able to find someone like that until you become that person. So yes, you may feel alone at first. You may feel the silence more deeply than you ever have. You may grieve the connections that no longer match your truth. But in that stillness, you begin to hear something else, your own voice, the one that's been drowned out by noise, the one that was never loud but always true, the one that doesn't scream for attention. It simply waits to be listened to. That voice is your anchor. That voice is your compass. That voice is your original self. The you before the world told you who to be. And when you listen long enough, you remember you were never looking for someone to complete you. You were looking for someone who didn't require you to leave yourself behind. But you cannot be loved that way if you are still abandoning yourself. So you stop, not all at once, but moment by moment. You catch yourself in the act of shrinking and choose to expand instead. You catch yourself preparing to lie, to keep the peace, and choose to tell the truth with love. You catch yourself about to chase and instead sit with the discomfort. And in those micro decisions, something holy happens. You become trustworthy to yourself, and that, more than anything, is the foundation of real love. Not attraction, not romance, not compatibility tests, trust. Do you trust yourself to stay, to speak, to soften without dissolving, to hold space for your own emotions without needing someone else to fix them? Because until you do, love will always feel unsafe. Not because it is, but because you're not fully with yourself in it. The path to real love is not paved with grand gestures. It's paved with small choices to come back home to yourself again and again. To let love rise from presence, not pressure, from clarity, not confusion, from alignment, not avoidance. This is the revolution. To choose love without losing yourself, to give without depletion, to receive without suspicion, to stand open-hearted without defense. Not because you trust others to never hurt you, but because you trust yourself to never abandon you again. That is what makes love possible. So much of what we call love today is nothing more than mutual projection. We meet someone, and without even realizing it, we project our unmet needs, our unresolved wounds, our forgotten longings onto their face, and they do the same to us. We don't fall in love with who they are. We fall in love with the part of ourselves we believe they will finally make whole. But projection is fragile because the moment they stop reflecting back what we want to see, the illusion begins to crack, and we call it disappointment. We call it betrayal, but it's not. It's disillusionment, the removal of illusion. It's not the relationship that failed, it's the fantasy. Carl Jung warned us of this. He said, "We always see our own unavowed mistakes in our opponent, and the same is true in love. We see our unmet desires in our lovers. We don't fall for them. We fall for who we are in their presence. And that is why love built on projection cannot last, because it is not rooted in reality. It is rooted in hope, in desperation, in longing to be completed by someone else. But no one can complete what you've refused to claim. So here is the truth you've been avoiding. You are not half a person, waiting for your missing piece. You are a whole being who has forgotten their wholeness. No amount of romance, chemistry, or validation will ever substitute the reunion with yourself. Because even if they stay, even if they love you, even if they try to give you the world, you will not feel it if you are not home inside. This is why people can be in a relationship and still feel profoundly alone. This is why you can be told you're loved 1,000 times and still doubt it. Because love cannot land in a self that is closed, and we close ourselves when we reject our own truth, when we abandon our inner child, when we ignore the voice that whispers, "This doesn't feel safe," just to keep someone around. Love cannot find you if you are not within yourself to receive it. And so we repeat the patterns over and over, not because we're cursed, but because the soul will keep bringing the same lesson until we choose to learn it. Until we stop asking, "Why do I keep attracting emotionally unavailable people?" and start asking, "What part of me is still unavailable to myself?" Until we stop wondering, "Why do I always end up hurt?" and start asking, "Why do I still betray my boundaries to be chosen?" The pattern is not the problem. The pattern is the portal. It's your shadow knocking, not to punish you, but to awaken you. An awakening is not glamorous. It's not a sudden epiphany followed by bliss. It's a quiet, often painful process of stripping away everything false, of grieving not just people but identities, of looking into the mirror and seeing the masks you've worn for decades, and choosing for the first time to take them off. Not for someone else, not to earn love, but because you're finally ready to be real. And when you do that, when you show up without the performance, without the polish, without the perfection, something radical happens. You begin to attract differently. You stop magnetizing chaos. You stop recreating your trauma. You start feeling drawn to peace, to presence, to people who don't activate your wounds, but resonate with your wholeness. Not because they are perfect, but because you're no longer asking them to carry the weight of your healing. This is how relationships evolve. From wounds to wisdom, from codependence to collaboration, from addiction to alignment. When you meet someone from your healed space, love becomes less about what you can get and more about what you can grow. It's no longer a strategy, it's an offering. And here's the paradox. The more whole you become, the less you need love, and the more you're able to truly receive it. Because it no longer fills a hole, it expands a foundation. It's not a remedy. It's a reflection of your inner peace, your self-respect, your emotional maturity. And in that kind of love, there is room for the full spectrum: joy and grief, laughter and silence, desire and fear. Nothing has to be hidden because nothing in you is unloved. But to get there, you must become the lover you've always searched for. You must speak to yourself with reverence. You must protect your heart with boundaries, not walls. You must hold your own pain without needing someone else to rescue you. You must stop waiting to be chosen and choose yourself again and again, especially when it's hard. This is the work. This is the revolution. To love without possession, to give without depletion, to receive without guilt, to stay soft in a world that taught you to be hard, to remain open in a world that trained you to shut down, to become a safe space not just for others but for your own soul. And when you do, everything changes. Not because the world becomes easier, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. You stop living on the surface and start inhabiting the depths. You stop grasping and start allowing. You stop fearing endings and start honoring beginnings because you finally trust yourself to hold what matters, not perfectly but consciously. That's the love you've been searching for, and it was never out there. It was always waiting just beneath the noise, the projections, the masks, in the quiet presence of your own heart. So this is where the journey ends, not in some grand explosion of enlightenment, not in a perfect relationship, not in a storybook ending where everything makes sense. No, it ends here in the stillness, in the quiet knowing that you have come home to yourself. That the love you have been seeking your whole life, the one that feels like belonging, like safety, like resonance, was never outside of you. It was the you that you had left behind, the self you abandoned while trying to be loved, the voice you silenced while trying to be accepted, the truth you suppressed while trying to be chosen. And now that you've come back, you start to see love in a different way. Not as a prize to be won, but rather as a frequency to be embodied. Not as something that is given or withheld by other people, but rather as something that you choose to express toward yourself, toward life, and toward those who can meet you there. You stop begging the universe to bring you someone who recognizes your worth, and instead, you become someone who reflects it. This is because when your relationship with yourself is complete, your standards change, your boundaries become more distinct, your yearning becomes more softer, and your magnetism becomes more intense. This is not because you're performing, but rather because you've stopped performing altogether. This is the paradox of love. The less you chase it, the more it reveals itself. The less you depend on it, the deeper it finds you. Not in intensity, but in honesty. Not in fantasy, but in presence. And when it arrives, not as a spark, but as a steady flame, you no longer doubt it, because it doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't require a mask. It doesn't disappear when you show your shadows. It stays because you stayed. Carl Jung taught us that to be whole is to embrace all that we are. Not just the light, but the dark. Not just the strength, but the softness. Not just the clarity, but the confusion. He showed us that individuation, the process of becoming truly ourselves, is the most important and the most spiritual task of our lives. Love, real love, is the natural result of that process. Because when we are whole, we no longer love to fill a void. We love to express truth. And that truth is unshakable. It doesn't rise and fall with rejection. It doesn't fracture under absence. It doesn't depend on perfect timing or flawless chemistry. It is steady, quiet, grounded. It says, I'm here not because you complete me, not because I need you, but because I am whole. And from that wholeness, I offer you my praise. When you love from this place, you are no longer a seeker. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer surviving. You are living. You are being. And in that being, you invite others to meet you not in fantasy, not in projection, but in reality, in humanness, in sacred imperfection. And when you're met there, something beautiful happens. You stop fearing love. You stop fearing loss. Because love is no longer something that can be taken from you. It is something you carry, something you become. That is the real revolution. Not a relationship, not an external validation, but a life that is lived in full integration with your past, your pain, your power. A life where you no longer perform for acceptance, but express from truth. A life where love is not a roller coaster, but a river flowing from your center, reaching only those who are ready to swim beside you. And even if no one comes, not for a while, not ever, you're no longer afraid because you're not empty. You are not waiting. You are not incomplete. You are full. You are awake. You are deeply, irrevocably alive. Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. However, he also knew that it is the most liberating. This is due to the fact that once you accept yourself, the world is no longer able to manipulate you with conditional love. You are no longer susceptible to those who offer love in exchange for your silence. You are no longer seduced by chaos masquerading as passion. You are no longer addicted to being needed. You simply are, and that is sufficient. From this place, every relationship becomes a mirror, but not a prison. Every encounter becomes an invitation, but not a requirement. You begin to navigate love not as a void to be filled, but as a sacred exchange. You don't demand, you don't beg, you don't contort. You show up fully, unapologetically, with your softness intact, with your fire alive, with your heart open but not bleeding. Because you've stopped waiting to be chosen. You stopped hoping someone else will save you. You stopped giving your power to people who cannot even hold their own. And in that stillness, something awakens.